joining us. I am Katie Morages. I am an assistant professor here at the University of Georgia in the College of Environment and Design, and also serve as director of the Circle Gallery, where since January we have been fortunate enough to have Peter Essick's work on display, his exhibit Work in Progress. Peter was recently named one of the 40 most influential nature photographers in the world by Outdoor Photography magazine. Over the past couple of decades, he has traveled extensively, taking photographs that are not just documentation, but make commentary on the impact that humans have on the world and their role in climate change. Before traveling extensively, Peter was a contributor to National Geographic magazine, among other publications. And now, instead of traveling so much, he has taken on a project that is close to his home in Stone Mountain and has photographed using aerial drone photography construction sites in Metro Atlanta. They will soon be published as a book. Peter said the book has been printed. It has left Spain and is on a boat somewhere in the middle of the ocean. We had hoped that they would be done before he came to lecture tonight. But please join me in welcoming Peter Essick.
Great. Well, thank you, Katie, and it's a pleasure to be here at UGA, the College of Design and Environment. I'm going to try and talk about a few different topics and then show some of the work that I've done, just to have introduction. I kind of focused on a few different aspects. One is aerial photography, and then the advent of drones, and then this project speaks to a lot of the development issues that are happening in Atlanta. So I have some pictures that sort of speak to some of the introductory aspects of my project, and then I'll show you the work that's part of the Work in Progress series. Okay. So as Katie said, for about 30 years, I worked with National Geographic, and we did a lot of aerial photography with most stories. But at that time, before about 2017, when you did aerial photography, you had a choice. You could either use a Cessna, like a little four-seater plane, and you'd kind of open up the window or take out the door and lean out, or use a helicopter. And both of those, they work well, but one, they're quite expensive, and also you have a limitation. You're supposed to stay about 500 feet planes, so it's a higher altitude. But it works for a lot of different projects. I did one, this was on a western drought, and this is in central California, and all the snow geese gather in one place. And there was one story where it was very hard to get access to in the Canadian oil sands. The oil companies didn't want to let you come in and take pictures of them scraping away the landscape, so aerial photos was really the only way to do it. And this was one story I'd done where I was in Australia. There was like a wildfire there. And this is closer to home. This is during the Altamaha River. And this is sort of the estuary. And again, this was another one of the western drought, where you get up real high and you could see all of Lake Mead and Las Vegas in the background. So aerial photography is always a great tool, but it's, you kind of have to have an assignment because it's pretty expensive to rent. A regular Cessna would be maybe $300 to $500 an hour, and your helicopters can run up to $1,200 an hour. So it's not the kind of thing that you can just casually go out and do. With the advent of drones, I got very interested in doing that. Basically, you could kind of control your own destiny, so to speak, and just do your own work. And once you bought a drone, all you had to do is charge the batteries, and you could also do kind of a low altitude. So the way drones work is you can fly up to 400 feet. And so the idea is that the planes are flying at 500 feet, and your 400 feet and below is sort of the drone area. And so that's how the FAA regulates the airspace. So I started looking into drones, and I just show you this because if you're going to do any kind of work now in construction, you're going to probably have people that are using drones for doing a lot of work at construction sites. And this is kind of the beginner one. It's a Mavic. It kind of fits in your hand, and you may have seen this. It costs like $600. And if you look at it, there's not much of a lens there, just a tiny little lens, so the quality is not real great. But you can learn how to fly, and all the controls are the same as if you were flying any kind of drone. So it's a good sort of beginner one. And this is the drone that has become real popular with journalists. It's called the Mavic 3. It will fold up into like a backpack, and the base price is about $2,000. And you can, if you look at it, there's a little H, and that means Hasselblad, so it has a pretty nice lens on there from Swedish famous lens and camera manufacturer. So this is the drone that I've been using. It started with Inspire 1, and then 2, and then now 3. And the advantage of this one is you have interchangeable lenses, and you have a higher quality. And the latest one actually has a full frame sensor, like 44 megabytes, so it's really high quality. And so that's it. But also the sort of prosumer drones have like wide angle. If you've seen these pictures like in your Netflix documentary, is sort of like going up over the mountain thing. It's really, for video, a wide angle is what you really want. But when I started using these construction sites, I realized I needed a little bit more of a telephoto, sort of to crop down. It sort of distorts the framing of the construction. So this is something that looks out of Star Wars, but this is what things have evolved to, not something that your typical fine art photographer would use, but this is what's called the Enterprise Zone drone. And this has been used a lot now, construction sites, agricultural fields, and it can take, actually law enforcement uses it. You can put a thermal camera on them and stuff like that, and it's kind of a whole, it's kind of evolved into its own little industry. And the last one is, these are, all the drones that I showed you up to now have four blades, but this one has 8, and it's called a heavy lift. And this is what the motion picture industry would use. So you can lift a 20-pound, like a $50,000 Airy motion picture video camera. And it usually takes 2 or 3 people just to fly it. One's flying it, and one's controlling the camera, and one's doing the focus. So it's not the kind of thing that you take lightly to get into, but I'm sure there's probably some flying over Atlanta right now doing in the film industry. You know? So I just put this in just so some people ask kind of like, how far can the drone go? And so it's all regulated by the FAA. There's a section where they regulate the airspace, and what they say is you have to maintain a line of sight. So in other words, you have to be able to see it out there, because also you're sending a signal to control it, and it's sending a signal back of the video. So usually that's about 2,500 feet away. They would actually fly much farther, but legally you shouldn't do that. And 400 feet, and you're not supposed to fly over like a big crowd of like a concert. And you know, the big one, there's airports, obviously you don't want to fly, or military, and a national park, and things like that. So there's a restriction. There's not every place you can just go and do your drone. So when I first got a drone, I just was trying it out and realized that this low altitude drone, this perspective, was really different. You could get down even to like a tennis court. I was actually just driving near my house and I saw this, like it said, tennis and swim club, but it looked like it was all abandoned. And so you couldn't see anything, but when you get the drone and get up, I could see like the tennis court, and I could kind of see this comment that how nature kind of takes back the court. It was, I figured it was probably in the 2008 financial crisis. It probably went belly up, and so then that's when, it's probably about 10 years, that's what it looks like. But, so of course, this is a Christmas tree light. Anything that's graphic always looks kind of neat from the air. And then I started looking at just the typical subdivisions, and this is really kind of a neat area, and right in Midtown. They call it the Condo Canyon. You could fly right in through. And then when I had worked on a story about Fernbank Forest, I had a commission from the Fernbank Museum, and they were restoring their forest. And so the drone, what's really unique about Fernbank Forest is it's an urban old growth forest of 65 acres right in downtown Atlanta. So when you're down in the forest, it's really kind of neat. You're seeing all these trees, but you have no idea that it's urban. So the only way to really show that was with the drone. And this picture actually really wouldn't even work very well with the plane because you'd be too high. So I was just flying just about, 50 or 100 feet above the canopy. And then this is what it would, you see the canopy in the fall colors. And then this is when I started to learn about a big part of old growth forests was in the soil. And it turned out that Fernbank Forest had all these invasive species come in. It was a beautiful old growth forest, 300-year-old trees, but there was all this English ivy. But once they cleared out, they did a project and spent thousands of hours of labor to actually pull out all this ivy, and what came up is these blood roots. So the seeds had been in the soil for like 50 years, and they would come up. So when I did some reading, they said that really the soil is where all your biodiversity is. You can even cut down the trees, but if you leave the soil, the trees will come back and the seeds, and you'll still have a really nice system there. So when I was driving back and forth between my house and Stone Mountain, there was this big development, and this was sort of the start of my kind of work in progress. I started thinking, well, now I know how to fly a drone, and I've tried these few little places, and I started seeing that, and just it would be kind of interesting to see what the construction sites look like. So this is where you start to see something that you really don't see when you're just driving by. You start to see how the soil is what they call grading in the business, So, and instead of kind of the real old-fashioned way where like a homesteader would go and there would be a lot, and they would pick out a little spot, maybe a high spot of the lot, cut down a few trees, and put up their home. That doesn't work very often with the modern subdivision. Usually they'll come in and pretty much, cut down most of the trees or all the trees, and then oftentimes if it's a large structure, they have to level and kind of scrape away everything. So it's a whole different type of system where you're disturbing the soil, and that's what you could see with the drone. So here I'll just show you just a few things here. Some of you probably know some of this, but we live in the Piedmont, which is known as basically the foothills of the Appalachians. And so this is the Piedmont. It goes basically from Birmingham all the way up to Washington, D.C. And all the species are similar within that area. But it turns out that that's where people like to live. They usually don't pick to live on the top of the mountains in the Appalachians. A few people up there, but mostly in the foothills. So the Piedmont is the ecosystem that's most disturbed by the development. And also, just to make note that we are in the historically where the native territories, Cherokee and the Creek, who were forcibly removed, and this is about 200 years ago, I guess, 1820s. But you can see where Atlanta is actually right on the border between the Creek and the Cherokee territory. So that's what Atlanta looked like right after the Civil War. It's traditionally been a transportation hub, and it's unique and it's not on a major river or a port, but that's what it was called, terminus, because it was where the railroads came together. So, and this was Gwinnett County, which was basically a lot of farms and very rural for a long time. So because of this history, Atlanta actually has a very large percentage of tree canopy compared to a lot of other cities on the East Coast. It's been close to 50%. It's been actually dropping, but there's Trees Atlanta is the organization in Atlanta that kind of looks at the tree canopy, and they've done studies, and that's been their goal for a long time, is to have 50%. And Atlanta could do that because of their history, because it was developed later, and because it wasn't a port and it was basically more rural farmland. If you look at the difference, this is a Google Earth, and you can see right in Atlanta they're actually trying to get 50% right in the city of Atlanta. But then in the outskirts, you have quite a bit of tree canopy. As compared to, say, Baltimore, which might have only like, say, 15% or something like that. And even less if you get up to New York, where you have like Central Park and a few places like that, but you don't have a lot of historic tree canopy. And the same goes with Boston. And it's all because they have been developed much earlier. Atlanta, maybe it's also the history with the Civil War. It was all destroyed, 1865, so we had to sort of start over from there. But here's the Atlanta Regional Commission and all the development. They always look at the city of Atlanta, and then you have the 5 core counties, they call them. And that was were the suburbs, basically. But now you have, I think it's 21 counties, which is the Atlanta metro area. So it's kind of expanded. And you can see the urbanized zone, you can starts with 1950, where the black in the area, and it's kind of been spreading out. And this is a similar kind of graphic, urbanized areas. I live on the eastern side, and so we've sort of just right on the border between the DeKalb County and Gwinnett. So I'm right in the area where it's sort of Probably like in 1990s was sort of started developing, but now it's going all the way out. I've been taking some pictures out in Pendergrass. It's like 40-mile drive from where my house, and that's where they're building, warehouses now and stuff, and the subdivision. So that's kind of it's really like the classic sprawl, as you can sort of, almost looks like this creature that's sort of moving out. And if it continues, they've done studies. This is what our East Coast would look like in 2060. It would be basically one city from Atlanta to Raleigh. It's basically a bait. It goes right up I-85 and straight, if we continue on the same path. So I just put a couple of these in. The book that I did about this project is coming out. There's a writer named Dan Chapman. He wrote about some of these issues in the back of the book for the essay. And this is the Atlanta Regional Commission, and this is their goal, which it's a great goal, but it's really not really work. Can you have? It's kind of one of those things. Can you have all these three things at once? Could you have the infrastructure, a competitive economy, and healthy, livable communities? If you can get all those threes together, and the answer is probably yes, you can do it, but we have to change how you do the construction. And here's, I just put in, he had mentioned in his article, I haven't been down here, this is just off the website, the Candida building on Georgia, hate to say Georgia Tech here, but it's on the Georgia Tech campus, and it's just, I guess, from what he had wrote about and what it says here it's just kind of this amazing, it's like a net zero energy building. It treats the rainwater. It has a sewage treatment plant in the basement, has solar, and it's like a net zero for energy. So basically it can, it doesn't take any energy to do that. And there's quite a few other things that they did. I think they even used waste wood from the university to build it and things like that. So they did everything that they could to make a sustainable, sustainable building. So he had used that, the writer, as an example that it is possible. So this is the book, and if any of you are interested, if you do a kind of a fine art photo book nowadays, they're very expensive to produce, and so the publisher, we're actually running a Kickstarter where people can pre-order the book to help pay for some of the production costs. So if any of you are interested, I could give you that information, but I'll just go in and I'll show you these pictures. Some of them you've seen, I've tried to not say too much about them. I mean, like as far as in the book, not trying to single out one particular developer or anything like that. But I just kind of say where they're at. This actually happened to be about 5 minutes from my house. They put in a big Amazon warehouse, and you've probably seen those. They're about half a mile long, and it took almost a year and a half to build it. So, but you can see that I always like this because it disturbed. You can see how the soil, kind of in different ways, and they always will bring in the gravel, the Georgia soil, the clay. From what I could gather, it's real slippery, when it gets wet, and so the machines don't do very well, so they always bring in this gray gravel. So I saw that a lot of sites. Oops, the other way. So kind of had an introductory section. When you do a book with any kind of design project, you kind of have an introduction, and then we kind of go into those segments of different aspects of the construction. So this section is sort of the introduction. I've actually photographed a lot of these pools but this was the first one I did, and I don't know, it's just, there's something sort of interesting about the way the just different designs that they put in. Most of these multifamily units now have a pool, and that's part of it. And I should say that's another aspect of the story, if you think of it from a negative or positive aspect. But I watched a 60 Minutes program, and they said in the United States, there's a shortage of 4 million what's called multifamily units. So that's where people usually would rent, like a affordable type housing or sort of affordable housing, where people need some place to stay, but there's just not enough there. And the ground zero, the places where there's in all the United States, is Jacksonville, Florida, and Atlanta. And that's because basically everybody wants to come to the Sun Belt, I guess, and seen as this affordable living, and you can get a job and sunny all the time and things like that, compared to if you come from New York or something like that. So you'll see a lot of these multifamily units. In the trade, they call them 5/1s. And it's usually like 5 stories, because you can build 5 stories. You can build up to 6 stories with wood, and so it's less expensive. So you'll see a lot of those. If you drive through Atlanta, or I guess probably here in Athens too, when they're building these, you'll see the 5, and the 1 is usually could be kind of a commercial, the little stores on the bottom, and the top 5 would be, rental units. And this is when you get into the more commercial skyscrapers. Each floor is sort of all spec'd out this way. And this is kind of sealing the roofs. And for the most part, I tried not to photograph when people were working, and I was also trying to focus mainly on just the actual construction and the materials and the wood and the soil and things, and not so much the workers. But occasionally I would be there when somebody was doing something like that. Let's see these. And this is something that I had done a little bit of work with the Trammell Crow. They commissioned me to do some photos of these for their offices, and so I had a sort of a tour with one of them, and he told me I'd always wondered about when they laid these out, and then I'd say that they would pour concrete over it on the floor, and what they do is they put, this is actually the electrical system for the building, and they usually, it looks here like they've got three wires for each one. So, but he said they would always have a redundancy system, and they'd actually get it all working, and then they'd pour concrete over it. It's all on the floor, and then go on to the next level. So. And I grew up in California, so this was one of the things that always struck me, was this very red Georgia clay, and sometimes it has, I guess it's the different iron content, but it can go from orange to red, and And they're always, when it was raining, it was always, after rain, it was always a good time for me to go take pictures because I knew nobody would be there, because they they have to take the day off, I guess, because it's just too muddy,
Can you go back for a second, Peter?
Uh-huh.
Do you have any idea
Which, this one?
why those rebar towels are leaning the way they are?
I don't. I've thought about that. It was. I don't really know, to be honest, but I don't know if anyone else would have an idea on that. But that's usually, they're always. You see the little square of the cement there, always in these big, long, like in the Amazon warehouse. The way they would support it would be it'd be all like a foundation would go in, but before it would go in, there would be all these little squares. And then when I first saw it, I had no idea why would they put soil and then all these little squares. And then I realized that was where all the support poles came in. And so this was in a larger, this was one of those 5/1s, and this was going to be, it's actually down on Memorial Drive, and it's actually, this was down in the parking area. But I don't know if they could bend those back straight before they do it. I hope so. And this was actually a couple minutes from my house. There was a old, like I said, I live right on the border where it was once sort of rural area in Gwinnett County, and then where I live is more, homes and developed. And so there was this one little area left. There was, it was an old barn, and there was like a scarecrow out front, and they would put the different things. And then one day I went in, and they were just tearing the whole thing down, and there's 4 houses, and then the one on the left was like the model house. And so they rolled out and they actually painted green, and then go from there for the model. These are guys going to work in the morning. That's that gravel. And this was Bobby Jones. Yeah. Yeah.
When we do these, your drone's taking still pictures, correct?
Yeah.
And how many, I'm trying to think of this like when you take pictures with the camera, how many, for instance, of that, how many do you have from Mr. Sue's frame that you use?
Similar, yeah. So what you normally do when you're flying a drone is you go up and you're sort of like, as a pilot, you have to go up and you sort of take off, and you're actually more like a pilot. You're not a photographer. And so you get up to an area and you're sort of hovering and you're kind of looking around for pictures. And then when you get to one, then you can sort of focus on the composition. And what's really neat is that you can actually see what you're doing exactly. It's almost like looking through a regular camera. It's coming back to you on this little monitor, and you can change your controls. You move. So then you move, and you can take one you like, and you can move over a little bit. You move a little farther back. So you can try different things, just like you would when you're standing. Taking a picture here and move back a little bit, stuff like that.
Do much cropping?
Well, if you really do it right, you can kind of do your cropping when you're there. It's pretty much, you can a little bit, but usually I don't do much, like big crops, because you lose the quality when you do that.
Does that change?
What's that? It's a full frame sensor, so you get 44 megabytes. So it's a very high quality. Well, you can look at the prints there. 24 by 36 is really not a problem. And I made some up to 40 by 60. You know. So these are all of different parts of the soils. And these were those little squares I was talking about where they put the poles. And I never quite figured out why that water went so that teal color there. There must have been something in the water there. But, and just I always will put these mounds. So a lot of the grading is kind of a combination of an earth mover pushing it and then the dump truck taking it away, you know. So, and it doesn't happen very often anymore, but this was actually during the snow. Those storms, I think it was in 2017, light snow, and I rushed out. And you can't photograph with a drone, you can't fly a drone in the rain. They're not waterproof, so, but you can fly after the rain or after snow or something like that. So all variations on the theme, same sort of theme. And this is something that's kind of hard to do with photography, is to do like a purely abstract picture. You can kind of do it in the studio and create sort of things, but to actually go out in the field and take a picture of something outside that looks pretty. If you get up close, you can start to see things, but if you get back, it's pretty abstract, you know, as far as. And that's what I kind of like about a lot of these pictures. Some of them are, if you get farther back, they're purely abstract, and you get up closer, you can start to see like little shovels and things like that. So that's kind of the fun of it. Another one in the snow. And here's what a lot of you may hear about, you know, called infilling, where you take a. This was the old Sears building. It was this big giant thing in Tucker, Georgia, and it sat there for probably 20 years and nothing happened. And finally, it came in, and so with all those little holes are little blast holes, where they're going to blast the foundation out. So they're kind of using an old site, which is really a best use if you can do that. You don't have to go in and cut down any trees or anything. And this was what I've seen is quite a bit, where when they have to make a completely level, like a big warehouse, they'll have to do blasting. And that's each one of those little holes, the same thing where they'll, I guess, put a little bit of dynamite in there, and then they blast it, and then they have to come in and sort of crack it up and haul away all the rocks and stuff. So these are, in a book, these pictures are sort of transitional pictures. You're going sort of to a different chapter, so to speak. These are sort of more in the different forms. This actually was in Topgolf. It's out in Beaufort when they were doing it. And first, when I saw this, I had no idea what this was, you know. And I couldn't figure out why they would do it. But then eventually I could see they were building the Topgolf, and then I could see that the balls, they all run by gravity down into this circle, and then that little square rectangle there is where the balls go, and they go by gravity back to the front. Those same squares. And you kind of tend to think of construction sites as pretty bland and just gray and stuff, and some of them are, but every once in a while you'll run into something like this where these are, I believe these are temporary, where they put those in to walk on to make the flooring. And this is another example of the wiring that's in the floor. And this is one of those, the 5/1 multi-family units. The roofing, this is where they, all the roofing material before. And a lot of these, you kind of see, they look kind of messy actually when you look at it. And what it is they actually have to bring up, this is like a commercial building. They have to, you probably use a crane to bring up all this material that goes on that floor. And basically they just leave it. Sometimes you'll see people, they just leave their hammer or something down it because nobody can get up there. And so they don't have to clean up every night, basically. So you can just kind of leave everything where it is, you know. So this was a part of the book. It was, at first I always thought when you do a book, you sort of like, it starts with you clear the land and then you go, and so, but it never seemed right to put the pictures of like the clearing of the trees at first. So the editor suggested putting it at the end of the book, which turned out to feel the best way. After you see all this, then you just have some pictures of the actual trees in the clearing. And this one we had kind of a, sort of the second to last picture, which is sort of what everyone wants, and there's just a shortage of, is to have your own home, you know. And this, just, I guess every human endeavor, there's some waste product, and you can kind of try and make some art out of it, I guess. So that's all I have. If any of you have any questions about any aspects, I'd be happy to answer those.